welcome back to the channel. Some of you might know that I'm an examiner for the IAM, the Institute of Advanced Motorists, and I used to be an examiner for ROSPA as well. Don't test for ROSPA anymore, but I'm an examiner for IAM for advanced car tests and advanced bike tests. So for those of you who might be preparing for an advanced driving test, or for those of you that are observers who teach people to pass an advanced driving test, I thought it might be useful for me to share some of my thoughts on what you need to do to pass your advanced driving test. Now, let's be clear before we start, this isn't a replacement for a course of instruction. I'm going to tell you about the test, I'm going to tell you about what happens on the test, how to prepare for it. I'm going to tell you what the sort of things that the examiner is looking for, how to deal with nerves, how to deal with mistakes and things like that. But I'm not going to go into really minute detail about every aspect that's required during the test. In order to do that, obviously you can look back through my videos, you can look at a lot of the videos that I've made cover specific subjects that relate to advanced driving. And there's no replacement, it's fair to say there's no replacement for a course of instruction. So if you really want to do your advanced driving test, and I thoroughly recommend it, it's a great achievement and it really does make you a safer and a better driver on the roads. If you want to do that, my advice is to contact one of your local groups, either through ROSPA or through the IAM. Find your local group, get in touch with them and go and work and partake on one of their courses, work with their observers, and they will get you ready for the test. So one of the things I'd say right at the very start of this, if you're unsure about any of the standards that are required, speak to your observers, they will tell you. And for observers as well, I'm hoping this will be useful because it'll help you to see things through an examiner's eyes, understand what it is we're looking for when it comes to test, and hopefully give you some tips on how to prepare your candidates, how to prepare your students for test on the day. So let's start by looking at the test itself. So an advanced driving test takes roughly about an hour, maybe an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. It's that length of time because that's a fair amount of time for an examiner to make a good assessment of that driver's abilities. And it's not so long that you're going to start getting fatigued at the end of it, because we are aware that it's very tiring, concentrating 100% for any length of time. And I think an hour to an hour and 15 minutes is just about the maximum time that we could expect somebody to stay on full concentration and to maintain that workload. Any longer than that, it becomes a little bit tiring. The test is carried out on a variety of different roads. So in the area that I test, I'm fortunate enough to be close to a town, so we can do some urban driving. We're also close to some nice country roads, so you're going to be driving on some A and B roads, national speed limit roads. And I'm also close to the motorway as well. So I managed to get all three of those main road types into the test. Your examiners will do everything they can to do the same. There are some people who live a bit too far away from motorways, I accept that, but there will be dual carriageways and things like that. So you're going to be taken for a drive for about an hour and 15 minutes on a series of different roads, urban roads, rural roads, and on motorways. The examiners, most of the examiners are like me, they're ex-police. I think the qualification always used to be that you needed to be an ex-Class 1 advanced police driver. Some of us were instructors as well, and we carried out examining roles within the police. But the IAM now are starting to recruit examiners from within their own ranks as well. And that doesn't mean that you'll be tested to any different standard. All the examiners meet regularly. We are supervised by somebody senior within the IAM, and there's a lot of work done to ensure that we all test to the same standard. So here's the first tip for you. If any of your observers tell you, well, this examiner likes that and Reg likes this, and they start giving you personal preferences on what examiners are looking for, ignore them. It's nonsense. Those days have gone. These days there's a lot of work carried out by the road safety organisations to make sure that we all test to the same standard, and your observers know what that standard is, so do what your observers have taught you to do. So how do you prepare yourself for the advanced driving test? Well, you're going to be nervous, obviously, and I'll talk about nerves a little bit later on in this video, but it's important for you to sort of just prepare yourself properly and prepare your car properly for the test as well. So firstly, in relation to your car, give it a bit of a wash. it's nice to turn up looking like it matters to you and it's important to you. Give the car a wash, give it a bit of a hoover out inside. I don't really want to get in and have to move banana skins and crisp packets off the seat, and I've had to do that on test. I'm not saying that that will make us mark you down in any way, but it's all about setting the scene and trying to set the right impression for an examiner. So give the car a bit of a wash. You don't need to spend hours polishing it, just make it look like the car's looked after. Give the car a once over as well. I have refused to go out on test in the past because people have turned up with defective tyres or other defects on the vehicle that make it unroadworthy. So remember, this is an advanced driving test. Part of that is looking after your vehicle, making sure it's roadworthy, making sure it's safe. Clean the glass. I want to be able to see out of the car properly, and just make sure it's a reasonably nice place to sit. You know, a lot of people let the cars get a bit mucked up and a bit of a tip inside. That's fine under normal circumstances as long as it's not affecting your driving, but just make a bit of effort with the car. Make sure you've got a reasonable amount of petrol in. We're going to go out for a drive, you know, maybe 30-40 miles, something like that on test. Make sure you've got enough fuel to cover that, because I don't want to be stopping for fuel when we're on test. That's one thing that hasn't happened to me yet on test. So as well as preparing the car, you want to prepare yourself for test. Now, your test will have been booked in a week or so before. You'll have had a conversation with the examiner. They'll have told you where they're going to meet you and at what time. And we usually meet on a car park somewhere near to, you know, maybe a coffee shop or somewhere we can get a drink afterwards and do some feedback. There's going to be toilets there, etc. So you know where you're going to meet. It might be worth you doing a little bit of a recce beforehand, so you know where you're going and how long it's going to take you to get there. You know, if people turn up late for a test, it's no big deal to me, but if it's particularly late, remember that we might have several tests booked in during the day, and if you go beyond 15-20 minutes late for that test, that's going to eat into the time for the next person, and that's not fair. So try and make sure that you're there on time. Again, I've never had anybody late for tests. They're usually waiting for me when I turn up, which is nice. But do a bit of a recce beforehand. Make sure you know where you're going. Make sure you know where you're going to be meeting the examiner. The next tip is to make sure that it isn't your first drive of the day. You know, the meeting point might be 5 minutes from where you live. But my advice isn't just to get in your car 5 minutes before the test and drive to the appointment. It's like anything else. You need to warm up to it. You need to prepare yourself for the test, and you need to practice beforehand. So one comparison I can give you is professional snooker players. So you might watch a very high-level professional snooker match. When those snooker players walk out for the match, that isn't the first time they've picked up the cue that day. You can guarantee that for a couple of hours before that match, they've been warming up, they've been getting their eye in, and they've been practicing. So it's worthwhile you going out and practicing before the test. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to go out with your observer and do an observe run, but it's worthwhile going and having a bit of a drive for about 45 minutes to warm yourself up, also to warm your car up as well. Make sure everything's fine in the car, that you're comfortable, that you're sat in the car in a comfortable position. So it is worthwhile just doing 45 minutes to an hour before the test, just to get your eye in, just to warm yourself up and feel as though you're competent and ready for that test. And believe me, your nerves will be much lower if you start that test having driven a little bit before the test. If your test booked in for 9 o'clock in the morning, get up early, go and have a drive for a little bit, and then get to the test venue about 10 or 15 minutes before the test is about to start. You don't need to get there any earlier than that. I'm not going to be there, or I might be out on a test with somebody else. So here's the million-dollar question. What's the examiner looking for? Well, let me break it down into 3 areas, and I'll talk about those 3 areas separately. First of all, the driver's got to be safe and legal. Secondly, there is an objective element to the test. There are various elements on which you will receive a score. And thirdly, there is a subjective element to the test, and that's how did the examiner feel about the test, and all those things are combined together to give you your score at the end. So let's start with safe and legal, and this is really important. The IAM and ROSPA, whoever else you might be doing your advanced driving test with, they are road safety organisations. So as organisations that promote road safety and are looking to reduce casualties on the road, there's no way that those organisations can promote anything that isn't legal. So throughout the drive on your advanced driving test, the expectation is that you stay legal and you stay safe. I've got a vested interest as well in you staying safe when we're on the road, because whatever you do in the car, I am coming with you. So remember that. It's not like on the bikes, but easier on the bike in that respect. If you make a mistake on the bike and fall off, I can pull up next to you and ask you what you were doing. You make a mistake in the car and leave the road, I'm coming with you, and I don't want to be in that situation. So you're responsible for the safety of you and the vehicle and me as a passenger, but you're also responsible for making sure that that drive is legal throughout. So I get quite a lot of questions on speed limits, for instance, when we're asked, when I'm doing this presentation at local groups. And the stock answer is that you must stick to speed limits. You must stick to speed limits on your advanced driving test, be that a 20 limit or a national speed limit 60 or a national speed limit 70 on the motorway. Now, we don't need to get into the technicalities of whether the speedo in your car is accurate or whether you're going to go off GPS speedo or whether it overreads by 3 or 4 miles an hour or anything like that. In very simple terms, stick to your speedo. But here's a little tip for you. Sit in the passenger seat of your car before you go on test. Sit in the passenger seat as though you are the examiner and try and see how much of the speedo that you can see. It's quite surprising sometimes in some cars. As an examiner, I can't always see the speedo. And I'm not generally going to use a GPS device or anything like that. I'm going to move around a little bit to try and get a view of the speedo. Give yourself a little advantage by not having the digital display up on the speedo. If you can turn that function off, that's great. Now, we're not trying to catch you out with speed, don't get me wrong here. I just want to know that you know what the speed limits are, and you recognise when the speed limit is changing and you react to that change in speed limit, especially when the speed limit is going from a higher to a lower speed limit. But also I want to see that, you know, you recognise when it's going from a lower to a higher speed limit. So it's got to be legal. Everything else, like stop signs, obviously red traffic lights, things like that, we want you to adhere to the rules. And a good advanced driver knows what those rules are, and on test they should be able to stick to those rules appropriately. Things like double white lines in the centre of the road and things like that. So it's got to be safe and legal. Now let's have a look at the objective elements of the test. Let's have a look at the things that you're going to be marked on. So if you look at an examiner's sheet for the IAM and you look at an examiner's sheet for ROSPA, you'll see that they are written slightly differently, but fundamentally they cover the same basic skills, and it's a series of skills and abilities and techniques that you will be taught by your observers during an advanced driving course. As an examiner, the first thing that I'm looking for and the most important thing out of all this stuff is an ability to plan. So feeding into that are some of these elements, some of these objective elements: good observations, good rear observations, an ability to make plans based on those observations. Remember, when we're driving along, we're making driving plans. They're based on 3 things: what you can see, what you can't see, and what you can reasonably expect to happen. And we'll talk about commentary shortly, but I don't need a driver to be commentating to me to understand and to know whether they are planning. I can tell whether they're making driving plans. It's the big difference between somebody who's had some advanced driver training and most of the other people out there who haven't had that advanced driving, whose driver training stopped when they passed the driving test. Most people out there drive along quite happily until they arrive at something, and then they go, oh, what's this? And then they start to think about making a decision, and then they deal with it. Somebody with a bit more advanced driver training, somebody with a bit more knowledge and a bit more experience, sees that situation before they arrive at it, and they start to make a plan. And they might have a secondary plan as well. It's not complicated. This might just be a bus in front that's put an indicator on and is pulling over. So, you know, somebody who isn't planning might end up stopping behind that bus because they haven't thought about it. For us, we might move to the offside and look past the bus, see if it's clear. Move our position, get our speed right, get the right gear, and then just drive past the bus. Now that to me demonstrates straight away that that driver's planning, that they're thinking ahead, they're planning for what's going to happen. So the ability to plan your way down the road is the most important aspect of all of this. You can still be rough with the controls. You know, you might not be particularly progressive when you're driving, but if you're making driving plans and you're putting those into action, you're already a safer driver. So that's a really important element of what I'm looking for on test. So within that, that means good observations, good long forward observations, scanning, looking in the far distance, the mid distance, the foreground, the sides, the rear, and using all that to formulate a plan. Remember, there's loads of videos on my channel about all these different aspects. So if you want to look at observations and planning, go and have a search through the channel, you'll find that video. The next important thing that they're looking for is an ability to apply the system of car control. So remember, both IAM and ROSPA, their training methods are based on police training methods, and the courses are developed around roadcraft, which is the police driver's manual. And at the heart of roadcraft, at the heart of advanced driving, sits the system of car control, the 5 phases: information, position, speed, gear and acceleration, IPSCA. So as an examiner, we're looking for a consistent application of system. We want to see that those systematic elements, that those phases of the system are being considered and applied where appropriate in the right order. So that means that we're not taking a gear and then pressing the brakes, for example. We're doing things in that correct order, especially the 3 middle phases. This is the most important thing about system: position, speed and gear. There's a lot of debate about brake gear overlap, and again, you can look back through my videos and you can find videos on eliminating brake gear overlap, making sure that you're off the brakes before you change the gear. In days gone by, that used to be absolutely essential for you to pass the advanced driving test. Certainly with the IAM, not so much with ROSPA, but with the IAM now, that's relaxed a little bit. So the IAM are happy for a little bit of overlap towards the end of the braking phase. But with the IAM, there are 3 outcomes that you can get from the test. You can fail, we'll talk about the outcomes a little bit later on. You can fail, you can pass, or you can get a first, and a first is a good high level pass. It means you've done a really good performance on test. If you want to get a first from me, and I think most of the other examiners will agree with me on this, if you want to get a first from me, I want to see that you are avoiding overlapping your braking and changing gear. There are occasionally times when it's necessary, and you will do that as part of a planned approach, but on most occasions I want to see that you're separating your braking and you're changing gear. If, however, you are still regularly overlapping that braking and changing gear, I'm okay with it, providing it's towards the end of the braking. What I don't want to see, for example, is if you come off a motorway slip road and you start braking in 5th gear, I don't want to see you on the brakes going 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd and down to 1st, which is quite common. That's a really unnecessary overlapping of braking and changing gear. If, however, you come off that slip road and you come on the brakes and you brake the speed right down, and then just towards the end, while you've still got the brakes on, you change down into 2nd gear ready to go up the roundabout, well, the IAM say that's okay, I'm okay with that. That's going to get you a pass if that's what you're doing regularly. But if you can separate those elements out, separate the braking and changing gear, then you're much more likely to get a first. There's a number of other elements come together all across the test for you to get a first, but separating braking and changing gear is an important one to get a good mark. Again, with ROSPA, you know, you look at your differences there between bronze, silver and gold. And to get a gold, there is an expectation that there'll be clear separation between braking and changing gear at that point in the system. Then we'll think about use of the car's controls. So I bundled together use of the car controls in the notes that I'm making during the test. But I'm looking for nice smooth steering. I'm looking for nice smooth 3-phase application of the brakes, smooth on and smooth off the brakes with a little bit firmer braking in the middle. I'm looking for nice smooth use of the clutch and the gear stick, and a little bit of rev matching if you can do it. It's not necessary, it's not absolutely necessary to pass the test, but again, if you're aiming to get a first or a gold, a little bit of matching the revs and smoothing the gears out is a really good way to go. So I don't want to be thrown around in the car because you clog an anchor on the car's controls, or you're chucking the steering in. I want nice smooth techniques to move the car along the road. Now, a lot of observers really concentrate on the techniques. I'm more interested in the outcome. So for a smooth steering technique, for instance, I'm not too concerned whether you keep a fixed grip on the steering wheel up to about 12 o'clock maybe, or whether you feed the steering wheel. It doesn't matter to me really which technique you use, as long as it's smooth. If you keep a fixed grip and your steering is rough, then I'm going to mark you down, but you're being marked down on the outcome of your steering rather than on the technique that you use. So you might use some techniques during the test that I wouldn't use myself, but if they work for you, then I'm okay with it. So a bit of an extreme example, but I've tested a couple of people who, in automatic cars, who use the left foot on the brake, and I passed them both. It's not something that's recommended by observers, but if it works for you, and I think in one of those In one of those cases, there was a physical reason why the individual needed to brake with the left foot, and it was absolutely fine. Just a little note actually on anybody with any disabilities or any adjustments that they've had to make in the car. Your examiners will always take that into account. So if you're using hand controls, or if there's a particular reason why you can't use controls in the car in a certain way because of either a disability or an injury or some other physical reason why you can't do it, please let us know at the start of the test. It's important, and we will take that into account in the marking. So that's use of the car's controls. One of the other objective elements of the test is progress versus restraint. Again, go and have a search through my videos. I've done a little video on progress versus restraint and what it means. From the best description I can give you is I just want you to get on with it. Remember, this is an advanced driving test. I do not want to crawl around. I don't want to sit behind tractors for 20 minutes because we're terrified of overtaking them when there's a really nice safe opportunity to overtake. I don't want to crawl along at 30 miles an hour in a 60 mile an hour national speed limit road, and I have done on advanced test. Progress means getting on with it within reason. So it's got to be safe, it's got to be legal. But if we're on a 50 mile an hour speed limit road and there's no reason not to, I want to be doing 50 miles an hour because we're in the car to get where we're going and we want to drive progressively, we want to get on with it. Restraint is sort of the other side of the coin, if you like, from progress. Restraint means we might be on a national speed limit road, but it might be totally inappropriate to travel at 60 miles an hour. You might need to bring your speed right down. There might be a horse or a cyclist or any other issues. So it's showing that restraint as well. It's not just barreling on regardless. So one of the objective elements is progress versus restraint. Please get a clear understanding. If you're unsure about it, speak to your observers, have a look at the video that I did on progress and restraint. Cornering is another objective element of the test. So you're going to be marked on your ability to drive the car through a series of corners. So what are we looking for from cornering? Well, everything that your observers will teach you. We're looking for a good position on approach, a good clear assessment of the speed of the corner. So that's a limit point assessment. We're looking for an ability to balance the car on the gas through the corner. So if we're applying system properly to a series of corners, that's getting your speed right on approach, your position right, your speed right, getting the appropriate gear to drive you through the corner, and then drive the car through the corner on the gas, keeping it nicely balanced. I don't want to be on and off the gas. I don't want to be moving the position, in reaction to oncoming vehicles and things. I want a nice planned approach. And I also want to look for the ability of the driver to link corners together. So as you're leaving one corner, I want to see that your eyes are on the next corner, planning where you want to be for that one. So we're driving around one corner, looking at the next corner. That's good advanced driving. I don't just want people reacting and dabbing the brakes as we're going through corners. Get your speed right on approach, position on approach, speed right on approach, and drive the car through the corners. Not aggressively, not too fast, just in a nice, balanced, progressive way. You will be asked to do some commentary during the test as well. And a lot of people go, I really don't like commentary, I really feel uncomfortable talking. But think of it from the examiner's perspective. I've been doing this for many, many years now, and I can hazard a pretty good guess what you're thinking. But it's nice to have that confirmed with a little bit of commentary. So, on test, you'll be asked to do a few minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of commentary. What I tend to do is 2 5-minute segments of commentary. Other examiners might ask you to do 10 minutes of commentary in one go. They won't expect you necessarily to do that from the start of the drive. I tend to bring it on about 10 or 15 minutes into the drive because I want people to relax a little bit at the start of the drive. So what are we looking for from commentary? Well, let's the overriding rule here is keep it simple. Keep it as simple as you can. I want to know 2 things. That's all I want to know. 2 things. What can you see and what are you going to do about it? Think of it in those terms. Again, I've done a video on commentary. Go and have a look at that. Breaks it down into a really simple way to produce a commentary during the drive. I want you to look in the far distance, tell me what you're looking at and tell me what your plans are. For me, that is the beauty of commentary. It allows you to share your driving plans with me. I can make a judgment on whether you're planning properly, but also it gives me an idea whether you're looking in the right place, whether you're considering the right things, whether you're taking the right things into account when you're driving along the road. These days, there's no shame in practicing your commentary when you're in the car on your own. Everybody thinks you're on the hands-free, don't they? So practice it. Now, You might do what you consider to be a pretty awful commentary during the test. I don't want you to worry too much about that. Remember, it's a driving test, not a commentary test. Think of it in this way. A bad commentary, if you've done a good drive on test, a bad commentary shouldn't really bring your scores down particularly much. But if you've done a sort of mediocre to average drive on test and you do a really good commentary, you can lift the drive, it can add a little bit of sparkle to the drive. And also, don't think you've got to give this constant commentary on what's coming up. So, some commentaries are so boring. I just say the road's going around to the left, and I'll go, yeah, and the road's going around to the right, yeah, I can see that, and the road's going around to the left, and it's just this constant stream of where the road's going. If the road's going around to the right, just expand on it a little bit. The road's going around to the right, I'm going to position to the near side, I can see the limit point moving, so my speed's okay, the gear's okay, and I'm going to accelerate through the corner. So in that way, you've inserted the principles of cornering and the system of car control in one very brief little sentence around what you're doing to negotiate a right-hand bend. That's a really nice thing to insert into your commentary, and it'll get my attention as an examiner. It'll make me think, yeah, this person actually gets it, they understand it, they know what I'm looking for. But don't sweat the commentary too much. I'm not going to mark you massively down on commentary. If the drive is good, the drive is good. And that's what I'm looking for above everything else. And then there's a few other elements, objective elements, that we're going to mark you on. Acceleration sense, for instance, that's just not always relying on the brakes when you're driving just to maintain your speed. So if you're on a downhill run, that might be taking a lower gear just to hold you on the downhill run. Use of gearbox, here's an important one. A lot more people are using automatic gearboxes, semi-automatic gearboxes, double clutches these days. And there's a number more electric vehicles coming through, and if you've got an electric vehicle, absolutely you should be doing your advanced driving test as well. There's nothing stopping you. But these different transmissions need to be taken into account on the test. So that the marking sheet says use of gearbox, and I'm going to mark you on your use of the gearbox. So for a manual, clearly you're going to be using the gearbox all the time, and I can clearly mark you on how you're using that gearbox. For an automatic car though, however, you can, if you like, at the start of the drive, put the car into D for drive, leave it in D all the way around the test, come back at the end, and there's no reason you shouldn't be able to pass your advanced driving test by doing that. You might not get a first though, and you might not get a gold, because as an examiner I want to know that you understand that car a bit better. It's your car, you should understand it. So I want to see that you understand that car a bit better, and you understand how the gearbox works and how the different functions of the gearbox works. So take the opportunity, if you're driving an automatic, take the opportunity during the drive to demonstrate once or twice those different functions. If you're on a downhill run, say you're in a DSG gearbox car, if you're on a downhill run and the car's just picking up speed, get your speed down to 30 if it's a 30 limit, and just click it a gear down or 2 gears down to hold you on the hill. Use the sport function on the gearbox when you're on the national speed limit roads, for instance, just to give the car a little bit more ability to hold on to the revs and make it a bit keener to kick down. Those kind of things. Learn your car, learn your gearbox. Again, be guided by your observers and demonstrate to me that you know how to use that gearbox properly. Like I say, you can just put it in D, drive all the way around, come back, but you are much less likely to get a first or a gold at ROSPA if you just leave it in D. If you demonstrate the functions correctly to me of the gearbox, you're more likely to get a higher mark on your advanced driving test. And one other element I'll mention, this is really important, this. At the end of the test, there is a manoeuvring element to the test for both ROSPA and for IAM. And it's not complicated. All I'm going to ask you to do is reverse into a parking space. Now, I won't tell you which parking space. I'll ask you to identify a parking space and reverse into it. I don't know how the other examiners do it. This is how I do it. And when I ask people to identify a space and reverse into it, about 50% of the candidates, for some reason, choose the parking space next to my car. Now, I like my car. You might have guessed from some of the other videos that I really like my car. And that makes me really nervous. So the first thing I think is, well, this had better be bloody good. So, don't pick the space next to my car unless there's no other spaces on that car park. Pick a space that's easy to get into. Make it as easy for yourself as you can. Go and have a look at my video on parking and manoeuvring, and that'll show you how to make it as easy for yourself as you possibly can when you're reversing into a space. But really, I just want the car to end up in the middle of the space, nice and parallel, nice and straight. What I don't want to see, if your car's got a camera fitted, I don't want to see you put the car in reverse and then just stare at the camera as you reverse back. It's really important that you have your head up and you look around yourself on the car park and you make sure there is nothing else around you. I want to see really good observations on that reverse into the parking space. The reason I mention all this is it's very easy towards the end of the test, when you come to the end of the test and you come onto that car park, to think, oh, it's over, great, and then relax and then forget about the fact that you're still on test. So remember that reverse, until you turn the engine off and you're happy with that park, you are still on test, and it's important to get that reverse park right. So that summarises most of the objective elements of the test. Those are the things that you will get a mark on. So for the IAM, for example, you'll get a 1, 2 or a 3 for each of those elements. So for the IAM, what you want to aim to do is get 2s at least in all of those elements. If you get a 3 in any one of those elements, that's a fail, and you'll fail the whole test for that. The 3 means you are not up to standard. 2 is the required standard. So if you get a 2 in all of those elements, fantastic. A 1 means that you're above the required standard, and if you get mostly 1s with a couple of exceptions, then you're likely to get a first and you're likely to get a good pass at IAM. It's a similar marking scheme for ROSPA, but think of it in terms of 1, 2s and 3s. Avoid the 3s. A 3 is a fail, a 3 is not up to standard, so you've got to be up to standard in all of those respects, including being safe and legal as well. But then comes the subjective element of the test. So what do we mean by the subjective element? Well, the subjective element really is, you summarise it by saying it's whether I've enjoyed the drive or not. So I do this in my spare time. It's a hobby, if you like. I was really lucky enough to get some training earlier on in my career when I was in the police that's given me this opportunity, and I really like going out for drives with people, and I like to see how people have developed. So I want to come back to that car park at the end of that test and think, yeah, I enjoyed that, that was good, it was a good ride out. I do like meeting people, I like having a chat with people as they're going around, seeing what the motivations were, but I like to enjoy the drive. So I want you to think in this terms. There's a nice little saying that a colleague of mine years ago at the driving school taught me, a nice little summary really of what you're looking for from this subjective element of the test, and it's the 4 emotions. There are 4 emotions that you can instill in your examiner, and 2 of them are good and 2 of them are bad. So let's go through them. The first one is boredom. Okay, I do not want to be bored on test, and I have been really bored on advanced test, let me tell you. I've been overtaken by cyclists, I've been overtaken by transit vans on advanced test. Now that's not to say that I want to be barreling along at ridiculous speeds. I want speed and the progress element to be appropriate for the road circumstances at the time, but I don't want to be bored. Don't bore me. The second one is interest. Not really an emotion, is it, but interest. I want to be kept interested throughout the drive. So I want to sit there and think, well, this person's just finished 10 weeks perhaps advanced driving course, let's see what they've got, and let's just keep my interest levels up. You know, when you're going along through a series of bends, just position the car nicely, show me that you've got the ability to balance the car on the gas. If we're behind a slow moving vehicle, even if there isn't an opportunity to overtake, just position the car as though you're looking for the overtake. Show me where the opportunities for the view are. You don't have to get an overtake on advanced driving tests. This is something that people understand. They go out, misunderstand. They go out and they're looking for the opportunity to overtake. Look for the opportunity by all means. But most of my advanced driving tests that I conduct, we don't get an overtake in. Not on single carriageway roads anyway. The opportunity just doesn't present itself very often, but there's nothing wrong with looking for it. So that's one way of keeping me interested. So that's the first of the good emotions. Don't bore me, keep me interested. The third one is excitement. You're allowed to excite me. Not all the time. I don't think I've got the nerves. I've lost all my hair anyway, but I don't think I've got the nerves to be excited for a full hour's driving test. But you can excite me 2 or 3 times during the test, maybe 4 times. And that might be looking for that opportunity to overtake. That might be going from a 30 into a national speed limit and taking a lower gear and getting ready to go. Just occasionally, just during that test, if I feel, oh, this is good, then you're really on the way to getting a good pass at the end of it. And the fourth emotion is fear. You probably see that coming. I don't want to be frightened during advanced car tests, and I have been frightened, and I have grabbed steering wheels, and I have intervened. So one thing to bear in mind is you don't want the examiner to intervene. It's quite a difficult role being an examiner, especially if you've been an instructor as well. And I love to instruct and I love to coach. And in that role, you are constantly sort of giving tips and hints. It's almost as though you're driving the car from the passenger seat. As an examiner, it's very different. It's really important that I sit there and don't intervene. Now, that doesn't mean I won't have a conversation with you on test. Let's be clear. I want you to be relaxed, and I want to have a conversation. I want to get to know you, and I want you to feel relaxed in my company as well. So we will have conversations as we're going around. What I'm not going to do on test, though, is intervene, because if the examiner intervenes, that's going to be a fail. So I have to know how to let faults develop to a certain degree, and probably go a bit further than observers would normally let them go before I intervene and say brakes or steer left or physically get hold of the steering wheel. So I let things get a very long way before I have to intervene. So if at any point during that test I have to intervene, that's going to be a fail. Remember, if you're going to fail a DVSA test for a particular fault, then that fault would always fail you on an advanced driving test. And especially if I have to intervene for safety's sake, if I think things are going really awry, then that's going to be a fail. So that's what I'm talking about with fear. I don't want to be getting to the point where I'm intervening. So 4 emotions. Don't bore me, keep me interested. You can excite me a few times during the drive. Don't frighten me. Put all that together. If we get back to that car park at the end of the test and I'm thinking, yeah, that was good, they've really learnt a lot during this test, you are well on your way to getting a good pass at the end of this test. You need to control your test nerves. Now, I'm not saying that you need to remove nerves, because you're going to be nervous. It's a test, it's a driving test. Everybody hates driving tests, don't they? I get nervous if I have to do any kind of driving or riding test. It's normal. It probably goes back to when we first did our driving test as a learner, but remember what I said before, DVSA have this very negative way of marking. They'll tell you you've passed and then tell you everything you've done wrong, but they don't tell you anything positive. But the marking system in an advanced driving test, they will tell you give you a really balanced feedback. They'll tell you what's gone wrong, but they'll also tell you the good stuff as well, and then give you a mark at the end of it. So how do you control your nerves? Well, some people are more nervous than others. Some people are naturally quite calm, and that's always nice to get those on test. But really what you want to remember is that, first of all, on an advanced driving test, if it all goes really badly wrong and you fail, you leave that test with exactly what you've already got. You don't lose anything. It's not like the DSA where you don't get your driving licence at the end of it. I'm not going to take your driving licence off you if you fail an advanced driving test. You'll go away with a very clear idea of why you failed, and you'll understand why you failed, because I'll give you really detailed feedback and you'll get that in a sheet as well. But the worst that could happen is you go away with what you've already got. So that's one way of thinking about it and just bringing your nerves down a little bit. Secondly, it's only driving. You are an experienced driver. You come on that driving test, on that advanced driving test, you've been driving for some time. You're not absolutely brand new, fresh out of the box. So it's only driving. It's doing what you do normally, but just to a higher standard, just to a better standard. We do this as a bit of a hobby. We do it because we enjoy it. Like I said before, we do it because we enjoy the company of people who like driving. We like to go out in the cars. We like to see how people have developed during the test. I don't want to fail anybody. I've got a good pass for everybody who comes on test. It's there in my bag ready to give you. You just need to earn it from me. Think of the test as another observed drive. You go out with your observers. They wouldn't put you in for test if they didn't think you were ready for it. They wouldn't say to you, right, you're ready for your test now, if they didn't think you were ready. The observers have a good, clear idea as to what's required on this test. So when you arrive on the test, even though we'll have a chat beforehand and I'll talk you through a few of the things that are going to happen on test, you already know what I'm looking for. Don't change anything on test day. Don't change anything. The wrong time to try something new is the day of your test. Do what your observers have told you to do. Stay relaxed. Engage with me. Don't just sit there frozen to the steering wheel. My view is, unless it's something horrendous, I'll ignore the first 5 minutes of an advanced driving test, because I know you're nervous. And I'll have a chat with you about what you do for a living, or where you've been on holiday, or you know what the weather's like, or your car. I'm interested in your car and how long you've had it for, and you know whether it's good or bad. And I want to have a chat with you, and I am genuinely interested. I'm not just doing it to put you at your ease, but that is primarily designed to put you at your ease, make you feel a bit more relaxed in my company. I will be making notes, but it's just to remind me what's happening, and I'll be writing as much good stuff as I am bad stuff, so don't worry about what's going on the notes. And just try and stay as relaxed as you can. It's a normal drive. Once you're into the drive, most people tend to relax enough to perform pretty well. You might get to the end and think that's not as good as I could do, but then you might find that we're a little bit more relaxed about our marking. And that's because we take into account the nerves. So always remember that. As examiners, we take into account the fact that you're nervous. If you're utterly destroyed by nerves and you're shaking all the way around, that's not the right mental state to be in on an advanced driving test. So just remember, we're human and we're just out for a drive. You don't have to do this. You're doing this because it's something you want to achieve and it's something good to do, and you're going to make yourself a better driver, and it's worthwhile. But it's not the end of the world. Nothing hinges on it. You're not going to lose your license. That's the most important thing to remember with your nerves. So what about mistakes? Well, you are going to make mistakes on your advanced driving test. I have never seen a perfect drive. I've never done a perfect drive myself. So there will always be mistakes during your drive. So let me give you a couple of tips in relation to mistakes. Firstly, don't grass yourself up. Don't tell me that you've made a mistake. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that are driving along, they go, oh, I've just done this. Oh, I thought it was a 40. And 9 times out of 10, I've already seen the mistake and they don't need to tell me. But on that 10th time, I might not have noticed it. I might have been looking at something else. So don't grass yourself up. Give yourself a fighting chance. This comes back to what I was talking about before with speed. If you find that your speed's crept up by 2 or 3 miles an hour, it's important for you to sit in the passenger seat and see how much of a view I've got of your speedo, because I might not be able to see that portion of your speedo, in which case just do something about it. And there's the second thing. If you make a mistake, do something about it. If you find that your speed has crept up by a couple of miles an hour, do something about it. Come off the gas. Gently squeeze the brakes. Get your speed back to where it should be. If I notice the mistake, if I notice that you're over speed, but then you've done something about it, well, that's what we're looking for. That's part of advanced driving, is sorting out your errors, knowing what the speed limit is and sorting it out. So first of all, don't tell me about it, and do something about the mistake. Now, if you go through a junction and you completely fluff it and everything goes wrong, the system's in the wrong order or whatever, of course I'll notice it. You don't need to tell me about it, of course I'll notice it. Now what I might do then as an examiner, I might want to see if that is a fault or if it's a mistake. And the difference between those is a mistake is a one-off and a fault is a mistake that repeats itself through the drive. And I can forgive quite a few mistakes on advanced driving test. You know, you can get away with quite a few mistakes if I see that it's just a one-off. A fault, however, is a fault, and that's what's going to tip you up into the 3s on the mark. And if you are consistently doing something wrong all the way through the drive, that's when it becomes a fault, and that's not acceptable. It's not within the standards. So if you fluff up a roundabout, for instance, I might find another roundabout, and I can vary my route, and I will vary the route to look at different aspects of your driving. So if I'm not happy with your cornering, for instance, through a couple of corners, I'll find another road that's got more corners and bends on it, so that I can have a look and see if that was a mistake, or if actually no, this driver isn't up to standard yet in respect of the cornering. So when you see the same situation coming up again, so you've fluffed a roundabout, you can see there's another roundabout coming up, just think, right, I remember that mistake I made last time. I am not going to do it this time. I'm going to show him what I can do. So a lot of people, a lot of observers, for instance, will say to you, oh, if you make a mistake, forget about it. Don't forget about it. Remember it, but don't let it overshadow the rest of your drive. Don't think that because I've made a single mistake, I'm going to fail this test. See it as an opportunity to demonstrate to me that actually, no, I can do this right. Watch this. And then I will know that that was just a one-off mistake, and I might mention it in the feedback at the end, but I'll understand what's led up to that mistake. If it's a fault, then obviously that's gonna mark you down. So don't let that mistake, that's a really important point, like you make a mistake, don't let it overshadow the rest of the drive. I had a candidate on test a couple of years ago who thought that they'd been speeding early on in the drive, and they just went, ugh. And for the rest of the drive, they just really weren't putting the effort in, because they just assumed 10 minutes in that they'd failed the test because of an overspeed incident. Actually, they hadn't been overspeed. There was a fault with a radar thing on one of these flashing signs, and the speed was fine. And actually, they did pass the test, but they could have got first if they'd have kept the standards up. And actually, all they did was relax, and just that mistake overshadowed the rest of the drive. So don't let it overshadow the rest of the drive. And do not think for 1 minute that you can go out there and do a perfect drive on advanced driving tests, because you can't. I can't. You know, there are people with more experience and more skills than I have, and they can't do a perfect drive. So the perfect drive doesn't exist. You'll make mistakes, but I am looking for faults rather than mistakes, as long as it isn't a real howler. because there are single mistakes that will lead you to fail in the test, and that means if it's dangerous, or if it's if you put us at danger, or you do something that would automatically fail you in one go on a DVSA driving test, clearly you're not going to pass an advanced driving test as well. But the feedback at the end will reflect that. You know, it may well be that, well, you would have passed this test without that big howler. If you can eliminate that, come back and do the test again. So here's an important point: don't be disappointed with the result. Okay, clearly if you fail, there's going to be an element of disappointment about it, but I will give you very detailed feedback, and so will all the other examiners. They will give you very detailed feedback on why you failed, and they'll also tell you what you've done well in. They'll tell you the things that you've done well, and they'll tell you the areas of develop. So a failed test is not a fail, go away, you'll never do this again. A failed test is an opportunity. It's part of the learning experience. All it means is that in some elements you haven't reached the required standard yet. It doesn't mean I don't want to see you back again. And I will always tell people who fail exactly why they failed, exactly what the issues were, and how to work on them. Quite often I will speak to their observers and discuss with them how to fix this issue and how to get them up to standard in those respects. 9 times out of 10, if I fail somebody, it's for 1 or 2 elements. And the rest of it is okay, but there's 1 or 2 elements that aren't quite up to standard. So I'll speak to their observers and say, just go out and concentrate on system, or concentrate on cornering, and this is what I want you to do. And then when they come back on test, actually I find quite a lot that people coming back for a second test after they've failed perform much better all round in all elements. And I've had people who've failed the first time and come back and got a first on the second attempt, and part of that is that they're a bit more relaxed on that second test attempt because they've already met me, they know what the process is, and they know what it is. They know what it is I'm looking for. They know the elements I'm looking for. So clearly there'll be an element of disappointment with a failure. One of the things that I've found a bit disappointing, really, if I'm going to put it that way, is I'm a bit fed up of telling people that they've passed, and then those individuals being really disappointed that they didn't get a first. So I suppose this is a message for observers, for the observers amongst you more than anything. It's important that you don't get people's hopes up too much. Remember, a first is a really, really top quality pass. So I don't give many firsts out. I bet only 10% of all the passes that I give will be a first. So if you get a first off me, you've done really well. But a pass is a really good achievement for somebody who's come from no driver training over a 10-week period. To come along and pass at this standard is a really good achievement. But I think on occasion people have been built up to expect a first, and then they're disappointed when I don't award them a first on test. And I'm a bit fed up of picking people up off the floor after they've just passed an advanced driving test. So if you pass, it's a really significant achievement. Well done, that's a brilliant achievement. If on the top of that you get a first, brilliant, well done. But please don't be disappointed with a pass. A pass is a really, really good achievement. If I was going to give you one single tip on taking your advanced driving test, this is it: enjoy yourself. Okay, most people who put themselves in for the test do it because they enjoy driving, they want to get better at it. So this is an opportunity to go out with somebody who also enjoys driving, who also enjoys being out on the road, and somebody who's got quite a broad range of experience, and they're willing to share that experience with you. So go out, enjoy the drive. If you enjoy it, you are much more likely to perform well on test. If you're going out and you're just really not enjoying it at all and it's a chore, that's a really difficult position to be in on test, because you're going to feel worse on test. Go out, enjoy yourself, enjoy the drive. I will pick up, and other examiners will pick up on the fact that you're enjoying yourself and that you like driving and that you've learnt a lot, and really see it as an opportunity. See it as an opportunity to come out with me or with one of the other examiners and say, right, I've been on this course, I've really enjoyed it. Look at what I can do now. Look at how much I've improved. And we will be able to see where you've come from and how much you've achieved during that course. So please go out and enjoy it. Above everything else, we do this because we enjoy it. And remember that whatever you achieve on that test, even if you fail, you are still a much better driver than you were at the start of the process. It might just be something silly that's led to you failing, but you are a much better and a much safer driver, and the roads are a better place for you having gone through that course of instruction. And here's the last point: don't stop learning. So once you've passed that advanced driving test or got a first or whatever, it's very easy to sit back and think, well, I'm an advanced driver now. Actually, you are just another step up that ladder of learning, and there are many, many more steps to go through. I'm still learning. I mean, I've done loads and loads of courses and loads of, passed loads and loads of different driving tests, but I don't consider myself to be the world expert on this. There is still a lot more that I would like to learn, and there's still a lot more that I am learning. I learn something new every time I go out in the car, every time I get on the bike, every time I go out with somebody new. So just remember that when you've passed that advanced driving test, you're not the be all and end all at that point. Some people get really overconfident at that point, and there is a risk that you're going to take more risks when you're driving, and that you're more at risk of an accident for that first sort of 6 to 12 months. Just remember, you've passed that first advanced driving test. There is more to learn. If you want to stay with the organisations, you can go and be an observer. Certainly the IAM have higher level tests that you can take. You can take your masters, and you can get a masters or a masters with distinction. You can go on and do some driver coaching, maybe with me or with other driver coaches or advanced organisations and things like that. There's loads of other stuff out there that you can go and do. Never stop learning. The learning is the joy of this for me. And the day that I get up in the morning and think, oh, well, that's it now, there's nothing more to learn about using the roads, that's the day I'm going to hang my keys up and give it up, because that's the day at which you become a risk. So never think that you've achieved everything you can do. Always strive to achieve more and learn more. Maybe you want to be an observer and start teaching this stuff. Keep up the learning. Because I meet people sometimes who passed their advanced driving test 25 years ago and haven't done anything else since, and of course those standards deteriorate over time. If you don't look after things, you don't look after these skills, if you don't practice them, those skills deteriorate. So always try and keep on top of those skills where you can, and keep enjoying it. I've all my life I've enjoyed cars and motoring, and now I'm enjoying the bikes. Keep on enjoying it, being enthusiastic about it. So that's it for this video. It's a bit of a presentation that I give to advanced motoring groups sometimes to help people prepare for their advanced driving test. I hope it's been useful for you. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. I know I don't always respond to everybody's comments, but in this case, if you've got questions about advanced driving test, please put them. I will do my best to answer every question that people ask. And if there's something that you're unsure about, if I've said anything there that isn't clear, please ask for clarification, and I'll give you clarification in the comments section. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's loads of look, I've got about 60 odd videos I think on now, so there's loads of stuff on there if you're interested in advanced and performance driving and motorcycling as well. I'm going to carry on doing the bike videos. So subscribe to the channel, press the notifications button. There's more videos to come soon. I'm going to do some more instructional stuff, so keep coming back. But for now, thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.